The story begins in a strange city with even stranger inhabitants. One of them has been arriving 2 days in a row at the same stop and always seeing the same woman, exactly in the same place. The third day, he could not stand it anymore and offered to help her. But she strangely asks him if he still does not recognize her. The stranger does not remember her, so he simply leaves the next day. It was raining and the same woman was in the same place. He offers to help her, but both seem to have completely different conversations. She tells him that she is almost out of time, so he asks her to invite her home so she can dry off and change her clothes. But while walking, he realizes that the woman is stranger than she looks, not only because of her physical appearance, but because she seems to hide a great mystery. Now we meet the nurse, John Lee. She works in the intensive care area, a place where patients are between life and death. That's why in this place is common to see and hear unusual things. But John Lee took it to the next level because she could interact with the soul of people. One of those days, one of these patients almost left this world, but luckily the nurses managed to act in time. Then we meet the icy man. He was so cold that he could not warm himself in any way. He turned on the heater and covered himself with all his blankets and still felt very cold. Now we meet the light store, a light bulb store that is only open at night and is the only light in a very dark alley. The funny thing is that many of his customers came to his store with no idea. They came to his store attracted by the light, like a cicada is attracted by a lamp. But the owner of this store is very special with his customers. He didn't let the strangers touch any lamp. Then we meet Hyun Yoon. She is a high school student who lately has seen and heard things that others have not. Also, lately her friends have started to act strange because they almost always ignore her, but since she is a very good girl, she can't think badly of them. When she gets out of class, she has to go down a very dark alley to get to the light store because she needs to buy a light bulb that her mother had asked for. Before she gets there, she sees something very strange. So she hurries to get there when she arrives. The owner of the store was a very good friend of hers. That's why she invites him a butter candy. Then she tells him about the things she has been seeing, and he tells her that in this world there are people who can be strangers, beings that are neither alive nor dead. Some of these strangers can be dangerous, and that is why he recommends to be attentive to the details. And if by mistake she meets one of them, she better pretend not to see it. Then Hyun Yoon has to go. And when she says goodbye to the owner, we see that he was actually very old, and not as others saw him. At the same time, the man at the bus stop, whose name was Hyun Min, who had kindly offered a towel to the girl at the bus stop. But when he notices, he sees that she had no fingernails. This makes him get really scared, but he gets even more scared when he opens his suitcase and shows her all his tools. Then Hyun Yoon arrives home. It turns out that all the characters live in the same building before he enters. He meets the woman from the bus stop when he greets her. She gets strange because she was a stranger and not many people could see her. Now we meet Hee-yeon. She was looking for an apartment, but since her budget was tight, the only thing she could afford was an old house in an old neighborhood that curiously overlooked the alley, which was always dark. When night came, she heard a high school boy passing by and singing because he was very scared, but because he was scared, he sang very loudly. And this annoyed Hee-yeon, who was a writer. But the strange thing was that the boy kept passing by, so she had to ignore him. While working, she falls asleep, and a strange shadow embraces her and breaks her light bulb. The next night, the same boy has to go through the same dark alley, and again he starts singing so he doesn't feel so scared. Now we return to the hospital, and there was an alcoholic in intensive care who had begun to have delusions, so the nurses have to change him to a normal ward so they can receive more patients. It turns out that recently there had been a serious accident. A bus had crashed, and many passengers were in critical condition, and others lost their lives. The doctors had done everything possible, is why they informed their families that patients are in coma, and that now everything depends on them. They must find the will to live. Hearing this, the nurse, John Lee, becomes sad, because that is the same phrase that is repeated over and over again in the intensive care ward. This made many nurses feel helpless since their job is supposed to be to save. Lives then, while she was in a bathroom, a relative of a patient asks her, "How do you get that will to live?" She tells him that she does not know how to explain, but that it really exists because she also suffered an accident where she almost lost her life, and the doctors told her exactly the same to her mother. But the relative was not a person, but a stranger who tried to enter with her. The nurse, John Lee, was terrified, but luckily, the cleaning lady arrived and managed to wake her up. At the same time in the alley, the boy again passed by singing, and the annoyed writer turned off the lights in her house, and especially the light that overlooked the alley light that the owner had told her not to touch. But as the boy passed by again and again, singing just as loudly, she went out and told him not to make so much noise. The boy noticed something strange and ran out of the alley. Meanwhile, at school, Hyun Yoon had classes until very late, and one of her classmates had fallen asleep. Her other friends did not wake her up and left her alone. Hyun Yoon tried to wake her up, but she did not pay attention. Then, again, she has to go through the dark alley. But this time, she hears very strange noises. Even so, she has no choice but to walk in, that she meets a very strange woman, and as she is a very kind girl, she approaches with her umbrella to cover her. But it turns out that the woman was a stranger. When she finds out that Hyun Yoon can see her, she starts asking her all kinds of questions, and when she realizes it was already too late, the strange woman starts to transform herself. Luckily, she makes it to the light store, and the owner of the store comes out to save her, and with a single glance, she makes the stranger turn around and go back to the alley. But she was not the only one. The high school student meets the woman at the bus stop, and seeing her alone, kindly approaches her and offers her his umbrella. Now we find out why he ran when the writer scolded him. It turns out that the strange woman was with her and was the same one who attacked Hyun Yoon when she saw how creepy she was. She ran away. The writer hadn't noticed until that moment, when she herself appeared to him and asks him to go home together. Terrified, she tries to run away, but she couldn't open the door, so all she could do was scream for help. But no one seemed to hear her. Outside, the woman at the bus stop wanted to talk to her, to see if they knew each other, but the boy told her that she better not get involved because it could be dangerous. The woman replies that it doesn't matter to her anymore, and the boy, seeing her fingers, panics, but gets even more scared when he sees his own legs that were all bent. Desperate, he tries to run away. But no matter how much he runs, the alley doesn't end, and he always ends up coming back to the same place. Later, the woman at the station goes to the light store. But before she can buy something, a policeman arrives. He is Detective Jang, who had also passed through the dark alley, but he still hadn't noticed. Now we know a little more of his story. He was a policeman very committed to his job. He had an almost perfect streak. He managed to close almost all his cases, not because he closed them satisfactorily, but because his cases always prescribed, and he never managed to find the culprit. One day, a new case had been assigned to him. An old man had died while watching television, and nobody realized it until many hours had passed. Everything seemed to indicate that it was a heart attack, and therefore a natural death. But the detective had a reputation for being very observant and insightful. That's how he discovers that it may not be a natural death, but rather a murder. But as they were only his assumptions, he must leave it for another day. At home, we learned that he lived alone. His wife had died. That's why he had a very lonely life, and you could say that even sad. While eating, he realizes the details. There were soy stains all over his house, and also on the face of the old man. So he goes to look in the nearest restaurants. That's how he manages to get to the only restaurant that made home deliveries. When he confronts the cook, he acts very strange. Detective Jang asks him, how come people can order from him if he is not on the app and his number is incomplete? He tells him that his customers always find a way to call him, then asks him about the gentleman who died, the one who supposedly had died naturally. The detective thinks he is responsible, but the restaurant owner tells him he doesn't know what he is talking about and asks him to stop making things up. When he returns to his office, he discovers that there were many similar cases of deaths that were supposedly natural, but for some reason or another, they didn't seem to be so natural. The next day, we see a girl running away from a heartless biker. The detective arrives to save her and confronts the biker, but he turns out to be the cook he suspected. He tells him that he is not understanding the situation and that it is not what it seems. When he turns to look at the supposed victim, he discovers why he was telling him. She was dead, and what he was seeing was her spirit still roaming the earth. The cook tells him that she shouldn't be here, then attacks him to get answers, and discovers that her eyes were very strange. But before he knows more, a car approaches them and seems to have run them over. Now we go back to the light store. The detective didn't know what happened next and just continued with his search for the man with the cat eyes. That's why he asks the store owner if he has seen the strange man, but he tells him he hasn't seen him and he shouldn't be looking for something he doesn't understand. Now we realize that there were more people with the ability to see ghosts. One of them was the morgue doctor who preferred to pretend not to see them. He was also very respectful with the bodies because he knew that their souls could still be near and hear what they say about them and what they do to their bodies. We also discover that the deceased could stay a few days on Earth to say goodbye to their loved ones. After that time, they lost all their memories and passed to a better life. Now, we see the nurse, John Lee, when she arrives at the hospital. She sees a stranger who was dressed as a bus driver, but she had not noticed and speaks to him normally. She tells him that where he is going, they cannot receive visitors. He, with a very sad look, asks her about the patients of the tragic accident, and she answers that his condition is very serious and that now everything depends on his will to live. This makes the gentleman even sadder, and his tears begin to flood the elevator. The nurse almost drowned. Thank goodness she reached the 8th floor and was able to wake up in time. During her shift, she has to transfer the alcoholic patient, John Lee. She volunteers to do it. She does this because he could also see the strangers, and they were constantly stalking him. When they are alone, she tells him that she can also see them because she, like him, was also in the midst of life and death. The gentleman asks what those things are, if they are some kind of ghost or something like that. She tells him that she does not know, and that sometimes she even gets confused and cannot distinguish if they are alive or unknown. But if she pays attention, she will notice that they have something peculiar that makes them stand out from the others. The gentleman says that she is afraid, and she recommends them to be careful. Meanwhile, Hyun-yoon was on his way home, and this time he didn't buy the light bulbs that his mother had asked for. But in that, he meets the strange woman and tells her that he knows he can see her. But she was not as bad as she seemed, because she just tells him to take care of himself a lot. Then Hyun-yoon meets Mr. Ice Cream, and he was getting colder and colder. He wanted to catch a dog that was constantly barking, and when she realizes that he was a stranger, she tells him that he has to go. But Mr. Ice Cream didn't seem to be that bad, and tells him to go calmly. Now we find out that all the characters were strangers. All of them were on the thin line that separates life and death. But some of them were already dead, and some of them were seriously injured. For example, Hyun-min, who always came to the same stop and saw the same woman he should already be dead because his back was completely twisted. But there was something that made him cling to life. The detective had been run over and was in intensive care. All that city was the afterlife, a world apart where people who are neither alive nor dead could go. And not only that, the light tent had a deeper meaning. All the characters had their own light bulb. Some lit more and others lit less. When they were turned off, it meant that their will to live was also turned off. That is why the mother of Hyun-yoon sent her every day to buy a new light bulb, because unfortunately she had already died and wanted to give her daughter what everyone in the intensive care unit was looking for, the will to live. She did not want her daughter to die with her. That is why she hopes that when she buys the bulbs every day, she will discover which one is hers. This was her last act of love before losing all her memories, as the morgue staff, after washing the bodies, made a funeral for 3 days. This so they can solve their problems before leaving and the lady's time was already running out. Now we are revealed the background of all the souls that are wandering in the dark alley. They are all in the same room and are related in some way. Or another, the first one is Hyun Min. He was dating the girl who was waiting for him at the bus stop, but their relationship lately had been bad. He wanted to marry her, but the girl at the bus stop was about to leave him because Hyun Min's whole family was against their relationship. They had told him that he already had a fiancée and to leave him so that he could marry her and start a family. It turns out that the girlfriend of Hyun Min was deaf-mute, and that is why her family did not accept her. Now we see the girl of the house and the strange woman who accompanies her. They were a couple, but in a society as conservative as South Korea, their relationship was not well seen. Besides, the age difference was a lot, and they are always confused with mother and daughter. Because of this, the tall woman did not want anyone to know more than anything, because she did not want to harm her girlfriend, because she was still very young. But just because she was young, she did not care about age or what others say, because she was really in love. Then we see Hyun Yoon and her mother. They were very close. And one rainy day, her father had taken the car, so they had to take the bus. Now we see the boy who was passing the alley singing. That day he had come from a basketball game, and because he had new tennis shoes, he didn't want to get them dirty. That's why they lost. There is also the man in the elevator. He was the bus driver who had noticed a small problem in the tire. His supervisor tells him that it's nothing serious and that at the end of his shift, he should take it to the workshop. It is here where all the souls are connected. All the souls that we have seen so far were in the bus 362, or were related to some passenger. In each stop, the bus was worse. That's why the driver wants to take it to the depot and not finish his route. But Hyun Yoon and his mother made the bus stop, and as it was raining, the driver had no choice but to take them. While crossing the bridge, everything seemed to go normal as an everyday trip home, but the tire that was bad explodes, and the bus suffers a terrible accident. The girlfriend of Hyun Min was on her way to the bus stop to wait for her boyfriend, as usual, and had just seen the accident. She had decided not to pay attention to the family of Hyun Min, but her great love had just suffered a terrible accident. She calls 911, but since she was mute, all she can do is run and cry. At the bottom of the water, we see how some of them had given their lives to save their loved one. Hyun Yoon's mother hugged her, so she won't get much harm. The writer's girlfriend did the same, and the guy in the white sneakers gave his ball to the boy so he can float to the surface. But the driver and Hyun Min were alone, so they got the worst of it. That's why the driver ended up losing his life, and the other one had a completely twisted back. It was a miracle that he was still alive. For her part, the girlfriend of Hyun Min was devastated, thinking that her boyfriend had died because the parents of Hyun Min had told her that without even having seen the body of their son. And not only that, she was told that it was all her fault, so she made the drastic decision to take her own life. But before she died, her boyfriend's parents had answered her and told her that he was miraculously still alive. When she saw this, she desperately tried to save herself, but it was too late. There was nothing she could do, so in their last act of love, they met again in the alley. Just like Hyun Yoon's mother, she wanted to give her boyfriend the will to live that he needed so much. Now we found out that in the alley, time works differently so far. Only a few days had passed, and Hyun Yeon's mother had only 1 day left. That's why she had to hurry and give her daughter the will to live. We also found out that their physical wounds affect their souls. For example, Hyun Min had a broken back, and every time he got off the bus, he walked a few meters and collapsed. The boy in the alley had broken legs, and when he realized he could no longer walk. Plus, we also discovered that in the afterlife when you die, you are cured of everything. For example, Hyun Min's girlfriend was deaf and dumb, and now that she died, she can hear and talk. That's why when her boyfriend came to the bus stop for the first time, she heard his voice. Even though he did not recognize her, she waited for him every day at the same bus stop, hoping that he would remember her and could say goodbye and continue on his way. But since that did not happen, she started to stitch his back so that he could continue living. This was working, and even the doctors could not believe that he was still alive. The nurse, John Lee, said that maybe someone else was giving him the will he needed to live. At the same time, Hyun-yoon meets Hyun-min, and he asks her how long have they been neighbors, and she says she doesn't remember. Then she collapses again, and her girlfriend arrives and puts him in her suitcase. Then he asks Hyun-yoon, why is it that they do remember each other, and her boyfriend has no idea who he is? When she leaves, the girl tells her mother that she doesn't want to go for light bulbs anymore because she is too scared, but the lady can't talk anymore and just shows her the light bulbs, insisting her to keep looking for them because otherwise she won't find that. Well, she needs to live? For her part, Tellwriter was starting to remember everything, and her light bulb that represented her will to live was starting to flicker, which means she was hesitating whether to come back to life. The next day when the nurse was leaving, she saw the boy who survived the accident. He wanted to give the basketball back to the boy who saved him. She told him not to worry, she would give it to him. Detective Yang noticed something strange about the store owner, and noticed something even stranger in the alley. Then, he arrived at the school where Hyun-yoon was, and noticed that all of his daughter's names were written on the lockers. When he saw this, he immediately returned to the store and asked the owner what was going on. What is that place and why is it there? The store owner says that many people never realize that they are in a different place. Then, he shows him his eyes, and he has the same eyes as the man he was looking for. It is then that the whole truth is revealed to us. That place was the afterlife, but not all those who were there were dead. To that strange city went to people who had already died by an accident, or something that cut their life, and not naturally, there could continue their lives and end it satisfactorily. But people who were neither alive nor dead were ghosts. There, people who had died recently were also ghosts, in that place, could not see people who still had living bodies. We then discovered that the owner of the store many years ago had suffered a terrible accident where his building had collapsed. He crawled, despite being injured, in order to find his daughter. But when he went to look for help, he ended up in the light store, which at that time was managed by a woman. He begs for her help and asks her to save his daughter. But she tells him that this is not possible, and that if his daughter is in the alley, she must go on her own into the store and pick up her bulb by herself. But the Lord tells him that his daughter is trapped and cannot move. But the lady tells him that she cannot help him unless she helps herself. It is. Then she realizes that he is already dead and died next to his daughter, who tries to give him candy to wake him up. In the end, devastated because he left his daughter alone, he tells her that he will do anything if in return she gives him her little girl's light bulb so that at least she can survive. That's how he became the owner of the store. The man died, but he was still able to save his daughter. The light bulb means the life of the person. That famous will to live people who are in coma have their bodies alive, but their souls are gone. There all the people go to the same alley. Each person must search for their bulb if they want to return to their body. That is why the mother of Hyun-yoon constantly sent her to the light store so that she can find her light and wake up from the coma. But not all the cases are the same. Just like in the mortal world, everyone is different. For example, the man who was looking for the dog did not really remember what had happened. He did not realize that he had suffered an accident and was in a coma. That is why he was constantly cold, because he had fallen on the mountain, and it was a very cold day with a lot of rain. That is why his soul still felt it, and the dog that barked all the time, and that only he could hear, was the one that actually saved him. The dog named Max was trained to bark non-stop when he finds a person in need of help. That's how he was able to save himself. That's why in the afterlife, the dog was still doing his great work. He kept barking to guide the man to the light tent, because unfortunately, Max was very badly injured and ended up losing his life. This was his last mission as a rescue dog. At the end, Mr. Khan finds the dog and sees him seriously wounded. It is there where he remembers everything and remembers that Max saved him at the cost of his own life. He asks for forgiveness and thanked him for saving him once again. When he discovers everything, he stops being cold and then goes to the light store, finds the bulb that lights up when he approaches him, and in this way, he can finally wake up from the coma. Then, at the hospital, they explain the case of Hyun-yoon, who had suffered a severe concussion to her head, but her body was practically intact because her mother did her best to keep her from getting hurt. She didn't even realize that she was in a world different from her own. That's why her mother once again wanted to save her before she no longer remembers her, because after the funeral, the souls leave all their life behind. But something different happens with the souls who are in coma, when they realize that they are in a strange world, either because they discover them themselves or because someone else tells them it is then and only then that they can go to the light store and pick up their light bulb. Otherwise, they will continue to wander in the afterlife. Now we find out that the bus driver felt very guilty for what happened, and in the little time he had left, he wanted to help the passengers who were trapped in the alley so they can forgive him and wake up from the coma. That's why he goes with the student to take him to the light store. He wanted to save him, to try to make amends for his mistake. On the way, he explains to him what is happening, and the boy finally realizes everything is why he can now choose whether or not to pick up his bulb. The boy forgives the driver and takes his bulb to wake up from the coma, and to say goodbye, the owner of the store tells him that he hopes never to see him again. But this was not as simple as it seemed, because if any of them makes any emotional bond with any spirit or person who can see him, this makes their mind not forget what happened, and just like the nurse, they could see the ghosts in the mortal world. The detective Jang tells him that this was already happening to him before he was even dead, so he doesn't care and decides to look for his light, which turned out to be the lighter that his wife had given him. One by one, the intensive care patients were waking up, but there were others who still couldn't do it. For example, Hyun-min couldn't remember anything. That's why his girlfriend, tired of everything, complains to him for not remembering her, tells him the whole truth, and explains that he is in a coma and that they were engaged, but he still doesn't remember anything. Although he shows her his body all stitched up, he has absolutely no memory. It turns out that due to the accident, his body lost its memory, and that is why his soul does not remember her either. She thinks she never loved him, but he still does not remember anything. Although deep down, he knows he feels something for her. In the end, his time is running out. Soon, they were going to prepare his body, and she will begin to forget him. So as a last act of love, he tells her that she should go to the light store and find a light bulb that lights up when he comes near, so that in this way she can wake up and continue with her life. At the same time in the alley, the bus driver was trying to enter the writer's house, but his girlfriend intercepts him and asks him what he is doing there. Upon seeing her, he can only apologize and tells her that this is all his fault. He knew something was wrong, and still he finished his route. She tells him that he is right, and that it is all his fault, but he is glad that he apologized. She tells him to find the others and help them get to the light store before their time runs out. She tells him to go help Hyun-yoon. He listens to her, and on the way he meets the girl's mother, who could no longer speak. Even so, she forgives him and asks him to help her daughter. Even though she doesn't utter words, the driver understands her perfectly. She too was almost out of time, so she wants to save her daughter at any cost. She goes to the light store and asks the Lord to give her daughter's light bulb so that she can wake up. He tells her the same thing that woman told him many years ago, that if her daughter is in the alley, she should go in on her own and pick up her bulb. Her desperate mother implores him to help her, and while she was lamenting her bad luck, she saw the buttersweets and discovered who the mysterious man really was. He was her father. The girl who was trapped in that collapse was her. She recognized her father because she was still eating the same sweets he gave her as a child. The man in the store also recognized her, and after so many years, father and daughter were reunited. At the same time, Hyun-yoon meets the driver. He didn't have time, so he can't take her to the light store anymore, so he just explains to her what happened. At first, she doesn't believe him, but she starts to analyze things and discovers that this was the reason why her supposed friends and other people always ignored her, meaning that they didn't really ignore her, they just couldn't see her. She still doesn't want to go to the light store because she doesn't want to be separated from her mother. When she arrives, she brings her light bulb with her and tells her that it's time to go home. But Hyun-yoon tells her that she wants to stay with her. But her mother tells her that this is no longer possible and that she must return home with her father. In the end, Hyun-yoon manages to wake up. Meanwhile, Hae-yeon also found out about everything, and her girlfriend tells her that it's time to go to the light store. She acts tough and says goodbye to her girlfriend, but outside, she collapses. When she arrives at the light store, she is doubting if the decision she will make is the right one. When she asks the gentleman in the store, what if the bulb breaks? He tells her that she will stay and live there. She, with joy in her eyes, breaks the bulb. She had chosen her girlfriend over her own life. In the mortal world, she wakes up for a few seconds, but then ends up dying. Now she will be able to be with her girlfriend without worrying about harm or what people will say. Then Hyun-min also says goodbye to his girlfriend, and for some reason, despite not remembering anything, he felt immense pain. The next day, the nurse, John Lee, tells her colleague why she chose to work the night shift. She tells him that in the afterlife, it is always night, and this is the time when she can help people who are in coma. Then she goes to say goodbye to the high school student. He was already fine, but his mind was still confused because he remembered that Ali vividly. He had formed an emotional bond with the driver. That is why his delirium was not over. Meanwhile, in the afterlife, we see that both the driver and the brides had forgotten what happened, and now they can finish their lives as if the accident had never happened. For her part, Hyun-yoon was very bad because the strong bond with her mother did not let her distinguish reality from the afterlife. She didn't know what world she was in. She didn't know if what she lived was real or a simple dream. Her father tried to cheer her up, but her mind was very confused. At school, everyone was also trying to cheer her up so that she could recover her life. But she was still very discouraged. She didn't want her delirium to affect more people. When she came up for air, she realized that what she had experienced was not a dream, because she saw the girl she had greeted in the afterlife. She was a ghost who had followed her to the mortal world because she felt very lonely in the afterlife, and she also had unresolved issues in the mortal world. Her mother had also continued her life, and now she was with her father. Both were able to recover the time they had lost since that tragic accident. We also see that there were many light stores throughout the city. Then we see that Detective Jang returns to the restaurant of the man with the cat eyes. The detective had not forgotten anything either. And when they find him, we learn that he was alive. But in saving the detective, Jang lost his life, and now he must go to the afterlife. But before that, he must find a replacement to help the souls cross the border between life and death. He must be the guide of the good souls and the hunter of the bad souls that only seek to cause harm in the mortal world. And as Detective Jang was so good at his job, he decides to give the job to him. That is why he is now the man with the cat's eyes. Meanwhile, the nurse, John Lee, is intercepted by a person, or that is what she believed, because it was a stranger who wanted to hurt her, because he did not help her when he asked her. But that was because he was already dead when he tries to attack her. Detective Jang arrives to save her. And with a single look, he makes him back off. We also see that Hyun-min still did not recover his memories. Had completely lost his memory, but he still felt a great pain in his heart, due to the great love he felt for his girlfriend. His connection with her in the afterlife was very strong. Despite the fact that it was daytime, he felt as if it was always nighttime. The doctors didn't know what he had, so they tell him that with time, it should pass. But he didn't believe that it would get better on the way home. He sees the accident site and curses his luck. At the same time, his girlfriend was being prepared, and the coroner tells him that he will soon forget everything and that he will be in a better place. But she had other plans. She didn't want to leave her boyfriend. So her soul comes back to him and tells him that she will follow him until he finally manages to remember her. In the post-credit scene, we can see the new friend of Hyun-yeon. She was a victim of an unsolved case of Detective Jang. And as she now has new skills, she could close it successfully. When she goes to check the crime scene, she meets a strange guy who, despite being younger, talks to her as if he is her superior. He tells her that he can also see ghosts, but not like he does. The series ends with him snapping his fingers by the way he talks. We could deduce that it is someone more powerful, maybe the president of the other world, or even death itself. Let me know in the comment box who you think it is, and that's how this story ends. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. If you liked it, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel to not miss any summary. See you in the next story.